There's Volodymyr Zelensky in his trademark green.
We'll expect the announcement here from the Sergeant at Arms. Let's just watch this unfold.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Героям слава!
Members, members of Congress.
I think it's too much.
I think it is. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of the Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's too much for me. All this for our great people. Thank you so much. Dear Americans, in all states, cities, and communities, all those who value freedom and justice, who cherish it as strongly as we Ukrainians, in all our cities, in each and every family, I hope my words of respect and gratitude resonate in each American heart. Madam Vice President, I thank you for your efforts in helping Ukraine. Madam Speaker, you bravely visited Ukraine during the full-fledged war. Thank you very much. Great honor. Thank you. Great privilege to be here. Dear members of the Congress, representatives of both parties, who also visited Kyiv, esteemed congressmen and senators from both parties who will visit Ukraine, I'm sure, in the future. Dear representatives of diaspora, present in this chamber and spread across the country, dear journalists. It's a great honor for me to be at the US Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. Thank you. And it gives me good reason to share with you our first joint victory. We defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukrainians gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world. Americans gained this victory, and that's why you have succeeded in uniting the global community to protect freedom and international law. Europeans gained this victory, and that's why Europe is now stronger and more independent than ever. The Russian tyranny has lost control over us. And it will never influence our minds again. Yet, we have to do whatever it takes to ensure that countries of the Global South also gain such victory. I know one more, I think, very important thing. The Russians will stand a chance to be free only when they defeat the Kremlin in their minds. Yet, the battle continues, and we have to defeat the Kremlin on the battlefield. Yes, this battle is not only for the territory, for this or another part of Europe. The battle is not only for life, freedom and security of Ukrainians or any other nation which Russia attempts to conquer. This struggle will define in what world our children and grandchildren will live, and then their children and grandchildren. It will define whether it will be a democracy of Ukrainians and for Americans, for all. This battle cannot be frozen or postponed. It cannot be ignored, hoping that the ocean or something else will provide a protection. From the United States to China, from Europe to Latin America, and from Africa to Australia, the world is too interconnected and interdependent to allow someone to stay aside and at the same time to feel safe when such a battle continues. Our two nations are allies in this battle. And next year will be a turning point. I know it, the point when Ukrainian courage and American resolve must guarantee the future of our common freedom, the freedom of people who stand for their values. Ladies and gentlemen, Americans, yesterday before coming here to Washington, D.C., I was at the front line in our Bakhmut, in our stronghold in the east of Ukraine, in the Donbass. The Russian military and mercenaries have been attacking Bakhmut non-stop since May. They have been attacking it day and night, but Bakhmut stands. Last year, 70,000 people lived there in Bakhmut, in this city, and now only few civilians stay. Every inch of that land is soaked in blood. Roaring guns sound every hour. Trenches in the Donbas change hands several times a day in fierce combat and even hand fighting. But the Ukrainian Donbas stands. Russians use everything they have against Bakhmut and our beautiful cities. The occupiers have a significant advantage in artillery. They have an advantage in ammunition. They have much more missiles and planes than we ever had. And it's true, but our defense forces stand. And we all are proud of them. The Russians' tactic is primitive. They burn down and destroy everything they see. They send thugs to the front lines. They send convicts to the war. They threw everything against us, similar to the other tyranny, which is in the Battle of the Bulge. Threw everything it had against the free world, just like the brave American soldiers which held their lines and fought back Hitler's forces during the Christmas of 1944. Brave Ukrainian soldiers are doing the same to Putin's forces this Christmas. Ukraine holds its lines and will never surrender. So here is the front line. The tyranny which has no lack of cruelty against the lives of free people. And your support is crucial, not just to stand in such fight, but to get to the turning point to win on the battlefield. We have artillery. Yes. Thank you. We have it. Is it enough? Honestly, not really. To ensure Bakhmut is not just a stronghold that holds back the Russian army, but for the Russian army to completely pull out, more cannons and shells are needed. If so, just like the Battle of Saratoga, the fight for Bakhmut will change the trajectory of our war for independence and for freedom. If your patriots stop the Russian terror against our cities, it will let Ukrainian patriots work to the full to defend our freedom. When Russia cannot reach our cities, but its artillery, it tries to destroy them with missile attacks. More than that, Russia found an ally in this genocidal policy, Iran. Iranian deadly drones sent to Russia in hundreds became a threat to our critical infrastructure. That is how one terrorist has found the other. It is just a matter of time when they will strike against your other allies. If we do not stop them now, we must do it. I believe there should be no taboos between us in our alliance. Ukraine never asked the American soldiers to fight on our land instead of us. I assure you that Ukrainian soldiers can perfectly operate American tanks and planes themselves. Financial assistance is also critically important, and I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way. Russia could stop its aggression, really, if it wanted to, but you can speed up our victory. I know it. And it will prove to any potential aggressor that no one can succeed in breaking national borders, no one committing atrocities and reigning over people against their will. It would be naive to wait for steps towards peace from Russia, which enjoys being a terrorist state. Russians are still poisoned by the Kremlin. The restoration of international legal order is our joint task. We need peace. Yes, Ukraine has already offered proposals, which I just discussed with President Biden, our peace formula, 10 points which should and must be implemented for our joint security, guaranteed for decades ahead. And the summit which can be held, I'm to stress that President Biden supported our peace initiative today. Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, can assist in the implementation to ensure that America's leadership remains solid, bicameral, and bipartisan. Thank you. You can strengthen sanctions to make Russia feel how ruinous its aggression truly is. It is in your power, really, to help us bring to justice everyone who started this unprovoked and criminal war. Let's do it. Let terrorists let the terrorist state be held responsible for its terror and aggression and compensate all losses done by this war. Let the world see that the United States are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Americans, in 2 days, we will celebrate Christmas, maybe candlelit. Not because it's more romantic, no, but because there will be no electricity. Millions won't have neither heating nor running water. All of these will be the result of Russian missile and drone attacks on our energy infrastructure. But we do not complain. We do not judge and compare whose life is easier. Your well-being is the product of your national security, the result of your struggle for independence and your many victories. We, Ukrainians, will also go through our war of independence and freedom with dignity and success. We'll celebrate Christmas. Celebrate Christmas, and even if there is no electricity, the light of our faith in ourselves will not be put out. If Russian missiles attack us, we'll do our best to protect ourselves. If they attack us with Iranian drones and our people will have to go to bomb shelters on Christmas Eve, Ukrainians will still sit down at the holiday table and cheer up each other. And we don't have to know everyone's wish, as we know that all of us, millions of Ukrainians, wish the same: victory. Only victory. We already built strong Ukraine with strong people, strong army, strong institutions together with you. We developed strong security guarantees for our country and for entire Europe and the world together with you. And also together with you, we'll put in place everyone who will defy freedom. Put in. This will be the basis to protect democracy in Europe and the world over. Now, on the special Christmas time, I want to thank you, all of you. I thank every American family which cherishes the warmth of its home and wishes the same warmth to other people. I thank President Biden and both parties at the Senate and the House for your invaluable assistance. I thank your cities and your citizens who supported Ukraine this year, who hosted our Ukrainians, our people, who waved our national flags, who acted to help us. Thank you all, from everyone who is now at the front line, from everyone who is evading victory. Standing here today, I recall the words of the President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which are, I think, so good for this moment. The American people, in their righteous might, will win through to absolute victory. The Ukrainian people will win too, absolutely. I know that everything depends on us, on Ukrainian armed forces, yet so much depends on the world. So much in the world depends on you. When I was in Bakhmut yesterday, our heroes gave me the flag, the battle flag, the flag of those who defend Ukraine, Europe, and the world at the cost of their lives. They asked me to bring this flag to you, to the US Congress, to members of the House of Representatives and senators whose decisions can save millions of people. So let these decisions be taken. Let this flag stay with you, ladies and gentlemen. This flag is a symbol of our victory in this war. We stand, we fight, and we will win because we are united. Ukraine, America, and the entire free world. Just one thing, if I can, the last thing, thank you so much. May God protect our brave troops and citizens. May God forever bless the United States of America. Merry Christmas and happy, victorious New Year. Slava Ukraini! Thank you so much.
The Capitol today for you. Okay.
To me,
Somebody will carry it.
I can hold.
Okay. We'll turn around.
Yes.
There we go. This flag was flown over the Capitol today in honor of the President's visit.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Is he out of the room? Okay. The purpose of the joint...
Excuse me, I gotta get my line.
The purpose of the joint... Okay, now. The purpose of the joint meeting having been completed, the chair declares the joint meeting of the two houses now dissolved. The House will continue in recess, subject to the call of the chair. I'm going to show this to you.
We see Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Kamala Harris in her role as President of the Senate presiding over this joint meeting of Congress. What you heard, I believe, what you heard there shouted from what is in effect the balcony, the gallery, was "God bless America." Again, the gallery is not full of guests of members of Congress and the Senate. Those were guests of President Zelensky. For security reasons, those are the only people who could be in the gallery today. It's interesting you saw him after they did the exchange of flags. Alex and Jen, you both noted simultaneously as Vice President Harris and Speaker Pelosi held up the Ukrainian flag signed by troops on the front line in the Bakhmut, holding it behind him. That's going to be the front page of the New York Times tomorrow. I think that's right. But then we also had that sort of joyful moment when he was kind of negotiating with Speaker Pelosi as to whether or not he could accept the American flag from her. And we saw him say, I can hold it. I can hold it. And then there was a staffer who offered, I'll take this from you as you walk out. He said, no, I'll keep it. I'm good. I'm happy to have it, the flag flown over the Capitol in honor of his visit today. We had all been talking tonight before this started about him being an effective communicator.
I saw that.
Ari, you said while he was speaking, he knows the American spirit.
Yeah, I felt that way. He really put this in the most rugged, individualistic sense of our history. You mentioned the bipartisanship that might have been at least hoped for at the beginning. He clearly wanted to channel that. This is not charity, it's an investment. It's almost like a ROI of foreign policy. We have it hard, but we don't begrudge you because we know how many battles you've fought. I thought that was incredibly powerful and appealing given the courage that he and other people have shown, but I also thought it showed a real clear acumen about what he's trying to do, which is not speak to 50% or 60%. No, he wants to speak to 80, 90% and have this country with Ukraine for the long haul. And I thought in many ways it was an incredible speech that did some of that.
It was an explicit ask, too, of the people in that room. He said, you each can help ensure that American support will remain solid, bicameral, and bipartisan. And he speaks good English. Those are not easy words for somebody with a strong Ukrainian accent, but he was incredibly pointed and specific on those terms. I think you could hear the weight with which they landed because he's asking for something that the members in that room actually can provide. They can do.
And he was also, to Ari's point, speaking very much to the American people there. You heard him say over and over again, we did this together. We're going to win this war together.
Together with you.
With you. It's not just our war. It's your war. We're here because of you. I was thinking as I was watching that, the writing of a speech, which I've been a part of, not as a beautiful speechwriter, but as editing it, which is the annoying part, I guess. But there's always an arc of speeches, right? When they're well written and beautifully written, as that one was. And you always want people to have very specific takeaways. That's the purpose. And you heard him say over and over again, as we just said, you're with us. This is our war. You heard him repeat over and over again the strength of the Ukrainian people. I mean, the piece that is going to stick with me is the ending where he talked about the Ukrainians on Christmas, even if they have no power, no energy, no lighting, they're going to sit and they're going to be strong. And that is the message he was going to send. He also was very clear about making his asks in there, making clear we can drive our own tanks. We need more support here.
We have artillery. But not enough.
But not enough. So strength, we need your help. We are going to get through this and we are going to win. I think that's what they wanted when they wrote that speech. And I think they effectively delivered it in the words.
He chose Bakhmut, which is a place in Donbass. Obviously, the war started in these two eastern provinces, but it was April 18th when Russia first declared the Battle of the Donbass. Bakhmut has stood standing since then. It has never fallen. So he used Saratoga as a remarkable example, because in 1777, the British came in from Canada. They were supposed to come in from the east and the west and from Manhattan, and everybody else forgot about this. They came in from the north, from Canada, and the Americans held out. And it was the first time the British general got sacked, and it was the first time the British said, these guys can fight. And that's why he used that example. So tonight people are going to Google Bakhmut and remember that that is the spirit of the Ukrainian people. They are surrounded in a place where the Russians have already voted to say that they will go and join Ukraine. Wasn't really much of a vote, as you recall. But that is the resolve they have. And he said, we are not asking you to come fight on our land. We will fight on our land. We just need to do this. I think the title of the speech will be Together with You.
Well, and also great Battle of Saratoga recall. Alec.
I'm Canadian. It was almost.
It's like in your DNA. But he was also singing from the same choir book as you, Rachel. He framed this as the struggle against tyranny. I thought one of the most the darkness on the edge of the horizon was you can't hope the ocean will provide protection when he's talking about what Russia is doing in tandem with Iran, talking about
the world is too interconnected
exactly.
and too interdependent.
The struggle against tyranny, the common freedoms that we share, the idea that, you know, one terrorist has found another, speaking about the Iranians and the Russians, and they will strike against your other allies. I mean, this was framed in terms of that global struggle against the dark forces of autocracy and tyranny. And that should resonate with Americans, too, as we talk about the other cases we're dealing with here in America, featuring many of them our former president.
Including to the Russian people. I mean, until they defeat the Kremlin in their minds, right?
Yes.
Which is basically sending a message to them, keep standing up, keep protesting, basically overthrow this guy in some capacity because he is holding you back, which I thought was a really interesting note in the speech, too.
Yeah, he put that at the top, talking about a recurring line and having those through lines and that being important about the way these things land. He said, our first joint victory, I congratulate you and I congratulate us on our first joint victory, meaning America and Ukraine. Our first joint victory was defeating Russia in the battle for the minds of the world. And then he came back to that idea when he was talking about the Russian people needing to be free of the Kremlin in their minds and needing to be able to resist this thing.
Hard speech for Vladimir Putin to watch tonight, because you talked at the beginning of this thing about Alexei Navalny, and there were people who were outside, including Vladimir Karamurza, whose picture you had up in your introduction. Vladimir got arrested. He went back from the U.S. to Russia on April 9th or 10th. And I remember talking to him then saying, I'm worried for you. And within 24 hours, he too was arrested. But his argument is, I have to be here with my people. So this speech strengthens the Russian dissident movement.
Yes.
And gives them something to hang.
Now, but on that point, he said at one point, it's naive to wait for steps toward peace from Russia. And that was what he paired with this idea that the Russian people essentially don't have the power to resist the Kremlin,
That is
right?
correct.
The idea, I think internationally, I think certainly the idea in much of American analysis of why Putin did this is that this is Putin's war. This is not something that anybody else in Russia talked him into. This is an obsession of Putin's. He has this idea of reconstituting the Russian Empire, if not the Soviet Union. He wants Ukraine to be one of the things that he owns.
Yes.
And in so doing, obviously, Putin has set his own interests and his own desires, as obscure as they may be, apart from those of the Russian people. But for him to then say, we cannot wait on Russia to take any steps toward peace, he's essentially, I think, conceding that Putin's not ever going to be out of power, that Putin's obsession with Ukraine is going to continue to drive this till the very end, and that therefore there won't be any sitting down at a table with Putin and ending this
That's
thing.
correct.
Yeah.
So what do we take from that when he asserts that, but then says that he's got a 10-point proposed initiative for peace? 10 points that you negotiate with whom?
With whom? And about what?
Yeah. I mean, he has to have the points for peace and the plan to get the global community to feel like he's open to peace and open to sitting down at the table. Zelensky does. What I heard from his language was, we cannot pause. And there's been reports about this, that some are saying, you know, pause through the winter. There's not much more that can be done. It's a hard time to be fighting on the ground. And he's saying, we cannot do that. We need more weapons. We need more to fight, and we need to continue to gain more ground. He made explicit asks there for offensive weapons. The Patriots that were given, that are going to be given to Ukraine, those are huge because they can shoot down. It's an air war now. They can shoot down, you know, a lot of these
cruise missiles. They can shoot down aircraft. Right?
Effectively, they're some of the best military tools that we have in the United States. But they want these long-range missiles to go into Russia, to be more offensive, to take out tactical supplies there. So what I heard was, we need to keep fighting. We need to keep being aggressive. This is not going to be a table for peace anytime soon.
Well, and some people think the winter could actually be the time to launch that offensive because frozen ground is easier to drive tanks on than muddy ground. There are other advantages beside, I mean, obviously there's going to be incalculable suffering and pain on the part of Ukrainian civilians, but tactically there is some talk that the winter could be weaponized by the Ukrainians equally in terms of this.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of Russian soldiers who didn't want to be there last February and last March who are also going through this winter with them for a war in which they do not believe. The Ukrainian people, because of Volodymyr Zelensky and because of their own spirit and because of the fact that they have become united in this thing, are prepared to at least say, this is our war for our land. We will live or we will die. But as he said, we know what every Ukrainian wants for Christmas, even if it is by candlelight this year, it is victory.
Yes. And the specific argument is we will win. And you saw him correct himself today at the press conference, the joint press conference with President Biden. He said, we hope for victory, and then he corrected himself. And he said, we are sure that we will win. We will get victory. But his message tonight was, and you can help us win faster.
Yes.
And to that point, this is a specific ask. And, I think that he has to project that. I think it's a question of the world's faith and also the world's willingness to support him in this as to whether or not that's made manifest in the world. And that's part U.S. weapons. It's part the U.S. leading the free world in a unified show of resolve in support of them for as long as it takes, for as much as it takes.
It's not that obvious, though, when you think about it, because it wasn't that long ago that a president of the United States phoned the president of Ukraine and said, I know this money we need to give you, which is in theory in our
military aid, we need
military aid, congressionally approved military aid, but we're not going to unless you do something else for me. So the idea that everybody knows what Volodymyr Zelensky was talking about is worth reminding people that not everybody knew, including the former president of the United States, which got him impeached the first time. Right? At the time, I don't know, Jen, how many Americans could have found Ukraine on a map, but now everybody knows where it is, and everybody knows that it is their battle, too. And if you didn't know that, he made it clear tonight.
Joining us now live from the White House is Admiral John Kirby. He is the coordinator for strategic communications in President Biden's National Security Council. He's also a retired Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. Admiral Kirby, I really appreciate you making time to be with us this evening. Thank you.
You bet. Absolutely. Historic day.
Well, let me ask you about in what ways this is historic. Let me ask you how much you knew in advance as to what President Zelensky would say and would ask for tonight, and what your immediate reaction is to what he told this joint meeting of Congress.
Quite a stirring, inspirational speech, and we absolutely expected that it would be. Based on the conversations here at the White House, we certainly knew that one of his prime messages was going to be one of gratitude and appreciation for everything that the American people, obviously members of Congress and this White House, have done to support Ukraine. But also, we expected that he would do what he did, which is kind of walk the American people through, walk those legislators through how tough the fighting is. He talked about Bakhmut, where he was just yesterday. That's where some of the most intense fighting of the last week to 10 days have occurred. Not surprising that he would want to remind the American people of the sacrifices that Ukrainian soldiers and, quite frankly, Ukrainian citizens are making every single day. And of course, we expected that he would want to talk about the future not just of security assistance and support, but the future of his country, where he wants to take it, how he wants to get it free and independent, prosperous and secure. So again, I think very much in keeping with what we anticipated he would speak to. But again, the words are not really what moves you. It's how he delivers that, and he just did a spectacular job.
Where is the dividing line right now? Where's the sort of Maginot line between what President Zelensky wants from the U.S. government and what President Biden is willing to try to give him? We've talked in the past, Admiral Kirby, about the Ukrainians' desire for more long-range weapons and the American resistance to provide long-range weapons so as to not risk the kind of war that would involve NATO and ultimately us. Where is that line in terms of what they want and we're not yet willing to say yes?
We wouldn't describe it as a line, Rachel. I mean, we have been evolving our provisions to Ukraine with the war itself. For the very beginning, when Kyiv was under threat, and it was armored columns of tanks moving on the city, everybody was talking about the Javelin anti-tank missile. Then as the fighting moved to the farmlands of the Donbass, which is a lot like Kansas, everybody needed and talked about artillery and HIMARS, and so we provided them. Now, air defense is the critical capability as Putin continues to rain down Iranian drones and cruise missiles on places all over the country, hitting civilian targets. And so today, the president announced that we're going to provide a Patriot battery, an advanced air defense system to Ukraine, as well as all the other air defense capabilities. So look, it moves with the fight, as it should be, because this war has evolved over the last 10 months. We don't look at it as a line, red line, or some sort of stoppage here, but we want to make sure that we're giving them what they need to better defend themselves. We also, quite frankly, and Rachel, you alluded to this in your question, Ukraine, but we obviously want to avoid a war with Russia. And we don't want to see this war escalate any more than it already has, because that's not only not good for the Ukrainian people, it's not good for our national security interests or those of our European partners and allies.
What can you tell us about what President Zelensky referenced in his speech about a peace summit or a peace initiative? He talked about 10 points that Ukraine is asking for, and he said in his speech that President Biden agrees with this approach. Can you tell us what he's talking about?
He is talking about a proposal that he set forth to the G20 here just about a month or so ago. It was endorsed by the G7, which obviously includes the United States. It's 10 principles of sort of what peace should look like in Ukraine. It's not a peace plan necessarily, but it's a formula of principles around which a peace can be formed. And obviously, we all want to see this war end. Obviously, we all want to see Ukraine peaceful again. So, of course, we think that those principles are worth discussing and fleshing out. And now President Biden and President Zelensky have put their two teams to work to go flesh that out, to kind of really mine it for context and detail and see what can be made of that initial document. One of the other things that President Zelensky expressed an interest in is some sort of summit, perhaps maybe in New York City later in the early part of next year to kind of really get international community support for that. Obviously, we'll sort of see where that goes, but we certainly support efforts to bring the international community together to continue to support Ukraine and to try to find a peace here, as President Zelensky has described, which is a just peace for the Ukrainian people.
Admiral Sally, good to see you again. Volodymyr Zelensky made a point that we don't need your drivers, we don't need your soldiers, we don't need your pilots, we need your stuff. You will remember many months ago when Poland actually made some sort of an offer like that. Says, we'll leave you some planes on a tarmac, you come and take them and you can fly them. That didn't wash with NATO. How far can that go? That was sort of a distinct ask that he made. Give us more stuff, including planes.
Yes, he's been asking for planes and tanks and other advanced capabilities now for quite some time. And as we said back then, we're not certainly standing in the way of other countries who want to provide some of those advanced capabilities. Our issue with that particular one was the idea of backfilling with American jets, right. Not the fact that some nation might want to provide jets. So, look, clearly he wants additional capabilities, and we are working very hard. Secretary Austin over at the Pentagon runs the Ukraine Contact Group. 50-plus nations coming together now 4 or 5 times to provide assistance to Ukraine, and some of that is very advanced capability. So again, we're going to keep doing it on our own, but as President Biden made clear today, we're also going to keep doing it with allies and partners.
Admiral, there's been a lot of discussion today about American unity and American resolve, despite our differences, in support of Ukraine. And President Zelensky called on that and asked on that and tried to tap into that for those senators and members who were in that room tonight. Realistically, is there an actual worry among the national security team at the White House that when the Republicans taking over in the House talk about auditing our support for Ukraine, or when some of them indeed today questioned whether or not President Zelensky should be here and should make this address, and whether or not we should, turn off the support to Ukraine, is there realistic concern in national security circles within the administration that Republicans might be able to screw up the support that we've been providing to Ukraine thus far?
We obviously want to see that support continue, Rachel, and by all accounts, it is. In fact, we're looking at now an omnibus spending bill, which will include almost $45 billion. We're hoping to get that passed this week through the Senate and the House. That will give us another $45 billion to support Ukraine. Look, we've had tremendous bipartisan support over the last, more than 10 months since the war began. And we fully expect that support will continue, even with a Republican-led House. So yes, there's probably members there that will have issues and raise their concerns. But by and large, when you could see it tonight. Just look at the chamber tonight. By and large, both sides of the aisle very much support continued support of Ukraine. So we're not overly concerned that support's going to dry up with a Republican-led House. As for oversight, we welcome oversight. We welcome efforts to improve our accountability of the material that we're sending to Ukraine. We ourselves are trying to deliver on that, and certainly we understand and welcome congressional oversight for that as well.
Admiral John Kirby, Coordinator for Strategic Communication in the National Security Council. Sir, as always, a real pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, joining us now is Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, who just attended President Zelensky's address to this joint meeting of Congress. I should tell you that Senator Murphy is also a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and the Senate Ukraine Caucus. Senator Murphy, real pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What was it like in the room?
I mean, absolutely electric. I mean, to watch Vladimir Zelensky up on that stage when the world community believed that Ukraine would survive a matter of days upon the Russian invasion, to think about the pressure on him to flee, to save his own life in the early days of the invasion. It's just amazing to see what one person can do. Leadership still matters in this world, and his example from the very beginning of this conflict is a big part of the reason why Ukraine still stands today. And I agree with Admiral Kirby. It was great to be in a chamber with Democrats, Republicans. You know, we're fighting like cats and dogs on domestic policy. I hope we stay united in support of Ukraine, but inside that chamber, you could feel it. And I hope that the American people heard his thanks, because this is not us supplying support. This is the American taxpayers that are putting their hard-earned dollars in defense of Ukraine. And I was glad that he was speaking directly to the American people tonight.
When he said towards the end of his speech that he wants to thank every American family for this support that was as explicit as he could make it. Let me just ask you, as somebody who's very, very well versed in the real politic of this legislature, of this Congress, is President Zelensky asking for anything that he won't get, that he can't get, that this Congress or this administration can't deliver?
Well, I think we've been very clear about the lines we don't believe it would be wise for us to cross in the interest of protecting U.S. security. One has been we're not putting American troops on the ground. He said tonight he doesn't need that. But we also have been clear that we don't want to supply weapons that could be used for attacks inside Russia. We don't want to go to war with Russia inside Russia. And so there has been an ongoing conversation when it comes to these long-range systems or these planes as to what kind of settings they will be used in. And so that is an ongoing conversation with the Ukrainians. And it's important for us to make sure that we are keeping the United States out of a direct conflict with Russia, while at the same time we're giving Ukraine everything that they need. And so there are certain things over the years that, over the last year, that Zelensky has asked for that we have had questions about. And in part, that is because we are being very careful to make sure that this doesn't become a direct confrontation between the United States and Russia. That's the right policy for us. It's also the right policy for Ukraine.
Do you support the provision that's newly announced today of these Patriot ground-to-air defense systems? As Admiral Kirby was describing, you know, these are some of the most advanced weapons that we've got. They can't shoot down cruise missiles. They can't shoot down aircraft. Do you worry that missile systems, that the air defense systems that advanced may be edging toward the kind of line that you're describing?
Listen, I think these are purely defensive systems, and it is simply a response to war crimes that are being perpetrated by Vladimir Putin. He is attacking Ukrainian civilians, attacking families, children, and we need to help Ukraine defend itself. Now, the reality is these are complicated systems, as you know, and it's going to have a long lead time to get these up and running. We are going to actually have to send some American troops over, not to Ukraine, but to places in Germany and Poland to train Ukrainians. So this does obligate more American forces to be in and around that theater. And we just want to be clear with the American people that with the Patriots comes additional U.S. forces that are going to be close to this conflict. I just think the cost to the United States is worth it.
Senator, it's Alex Wagner. Every time there's an inflection point in this battle, it seems like Vladimir Putin raises the specter of nuclear weapons. What's your expectation for tomorrow in terms of the messaging out of the Kremlin? We know that everything from, Zelensky being the Time magazine person of the year has gotten a response from the Kremlin. Dmitry Peskov called that downright, I think, Russia-phobic. They do not like seeing Zelensky with the support of the West. Now there's actual defensive weaponry, the Patriot missiles that are in the mix. What's your expectation here, and how seriously should the White House be taking the I don't want to call it saber rattling, because I think that sort of answers the question I have, but how should we understand the Kremlin's positioning?
I mean, the scenes from this evening are going to make Putin furious, no doubt about it, as will the announcement that Patriot missiles. But remember, he has drawn these lines in the sand repeatedly as a mechanism to try to scare Europe and the United States away from supporting Ukraine. He made similar threats when we were talking about bringing new countries into NATO. The reality is Putin doesn't want a direct confrontation with the United States. He knows that he would risk that with any kind of nuclear weapons usage, and certainly would get that if he moved on NATO. So Putin is in a position where he can barely afford the war in Ukraine. He absolutely can't afford a war with the United States or with NATO. And so, well, you always have to take nuclear weapons usage seriously. He's made plenty of these threats in the past. And as long as we're holding to those lines I talked about, no U.S. troops in Ukraine, no systems that are intended to be used for attacks inside Russia, I think we can stay out of a direct conflict, and I think we can accept his threats as pretty empty.
Senator Murphy, it's Jen Psaki. How are you?
Hey, Jen.
I wanted to ask you about what we heard from Zelensky, and we also know is happening on the ground, which is the fact that people have lost power, about 2/3 of Kyiv, larger swaths of the country, and the Russians are still targeting sources of energy across the country. What can actually be done from the U.S. or other parts of the world to help people in the country as people are freezing?
So what's important about the package that we are due to approve this week in the United States Senate and the House is that, while the total price tag is $45 billion, about $17 billion of that is economic aid, non-military aid. And there's been talk in the new House Republican majority that they're going to support military aid, but they're not going to support economic aid. Well, that's exactly what Putin wants, because he is now taking out the economic heart, the infrastructure heart of Ukraine, and he's hoping that the United States won't support Ukraine in its non-military needs, like getting its energy systems and its heating systems back up and operating. So there's billions of dollars in this package to help Ukraine get what they need, and that's why we need Republicans and Democrats to come together and pass it immediately. But I also loved what he said about the willingness of the Ukrainian people to sacrifice, right? He referenced these moments in American history, right? You think of Valley Forge, when Americans had to endure great sacrifice for our cause, which was a global cause. We're going to support them to make sure that the fewest number of people are freezing and starving. But I also think that he inspired our nation, because he said, listen, with your help, we are willing to endure this sacrifice because we know this is a fight for world stability, world democracy, world human rights.
Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Sir, thank you for joining us tonight. We know it's a big night and an emotional night in Washington. You were there in the room for the speech, joining us here afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's interesting, you know, what the senator was saying there in terms of referencing, you know, American touchstones. He talked about the Battle of Saratoga, as you were discussing, seen obviously as a turning point in the U.S. Revolutionary War against the British, but also the Battle of the Bulge, which was 1944, December 1944, a surprise attack by the Germans with a far superior force. It ended up being the largest, I think it was the deadliest single battle of World War II for American forces in the entire conflict. And it was the last major German initiative on the Western Front, because that fight was worth it.
But he made the point that they were there on the ground fighting like his soldiers are, like his.
In December, in the cold, with against a larger force that everybody believed would have defeated them already. That's right. All right, in just a moment, we're going to go live to Ukraine to talk with a key advisor to Ukraine's military. Our special coverage of President Zelensky's historic speech to Congress continues right after this. Stay with us.
Our two nations are allies in this battle. And next year will be a turning point. I know it, the point when Ukrainian courage and American resolve must guarantee the future of our common freedom, the freedom of people who stand for their values. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukraine's gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world. Americans gained this victory, and that's why you have succeeded in uniting the global community to protect freedom and international law. Europeans gained this victory. And that's why Europe is now stronger and more independent than ever. The Russian tyranny has lost control over us.
The Russian tyranny has lost control over us. Joining us now, live from Kyiv, is Ukraine's former Minister of Defense and military advisor, Andriy Zagorodnyuk. Mr. Zagorodnyuk, thank you very much for being with us here tonight. I really appreciate you being here at this late hour.
Thank you very much.
This is a historic day here for us in the United States to have a wartime leader leave his country for the first time since the invasion 10 months ago, to choose to come here to make this case to the American legislature, to the American people. It's a big deal for us, but I have to imagine that this is a very big deal for you in Kyiv, especially given the risk that it takes to have your president leaving.
Yeah, of course. And obviously this was just for many people, it was a big surprise because we knew that Zelensky is constantly a target for Russians, and his safety is a constant concern. They hate him. And of course, they're trying to do whatever is possible to disrupt our resistance. And so his international travel, it's the first time he travels anywhere after the February 24th. So it's of course a big deal, but also we were really pleased to see the warm welcome. We just watched, all of us probably watched his speech in the Congress, and how warmly he was welcomed there, and how confident was the support, and how unanimous was the support. It's great, of course, and we were really happy about that.
Given the risk of him leaving, as you were just describing, I think eloquently, what would make it worth it? What do you sort of meaningfully expect in terms of additional and continued support from the United States that would make this kind of risk worth it? What is President Zelensky asking for that you think he reasonably could expect from the United States that the U.S. hasn't yet given him?
Well, first of all, Zelensky traveled a lot around the country, and it was every trip was a risky. So he used to do that because he doesn't want to stay in an office, in a bunker, and rule the country from the sort of enclosed space. He constantly among the people. He projects presence, confidence, and people appreciate this a lot. But traveling to U.S. is, of course, it's a whole different level. But it's worth it because Zelensky needed to, first of all, he needed to project a confidence in the victory, which I think he did in his speech to the American population, to the American people, and to American lawmakers, that we're absolutely certain that we can win, and we're absolutely determined to win, and we are strong despite of all the hardships we're going through. So he wanted to deliver this in person so they can actually see it, they can feel it, and they can continue support. Next year is going to be very difficult. So first of all, this winter is going to be difficult. It is difficult already because we have constant attacks for our critical infrastructure. Ukraine is constantly having power disruptions, and this is a serious problem which we deal with. Like every citizen of Ukraine deals with it every day. But the whole year is going to be a year of significant battles for the country. We're going to push Russians out. We're going to push them finally out of our country. And of course, Russians are preparing for that. They're probably going to call another wave of mobilization, and they're probably going to try another offensive at the end of the winter. So he wanted to make sure that United States sees that our intention to fight, and also to secure the support for that period of time.